So our next speaker, Sarah Kohler, stewards land with her husband Mark in western Massachusetts. They keep a small herd of Scottish Highland cattle to keep the pasture land open and a large flock of landscape chickens that lay blue and green eggs. An independent researcher of pre-colonial stone and earthworks of the Northeast, Sarah chairs the newly created NERA Preservation Committee. And today she's going to talk to us about evidence of construction and use of earthen mounds and enclosures in New England. Please welcome Sarah.
I live in Massachusetts, just south of the Vermont-New Hampshire border. And in my documentation of stone landscapes, I kept seeing uniformly shaped earthen mounds. And I contacted people at UMass and other places to talk about them. And seeing earthen mounds in the forest as I was documenting ceremonial stone landscapes or lithic landscapes, and recognizing them as being the same visually as that which is seen in the Midwest of this continent, of the United States, as known now. So I went to school, and as part of going to school, I was taught ancient history, Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, ancient Greeks, Roman Empire. But in all the years of schooling, no one ever mentioned the ancient history underneath our own feet. As far as I knew, it began, nobody showed me how to advance this. Is that it? Yeah, began with this guy, right? That was the history that I was taught, and I'm sure many of you were taught as the beginning of the history lessons of our lands. So let's begin there and go backwards and see who was living north of where the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, right, where they landed on the island they called Hispaniola, and who was living on what is now known as the eastern United States. So I don't know how many of you know any of this history. I can't read it from here, but I'll make it here. So the Mississippian cultures from 700 CE until the 1730s. And the Fort Ancient culture, I should have had a lesson in how to use this thing. I don't know. Press the side for the laser. Green button. Gotcha. Okay. This is Fort Ancient. It is a completely separate cultural group from the Mississippian cultures, and it is believed that they are the ones who built the Great Serpent Mound and introduced maize to North America. I want to point out one of the greatest cities. Okay, this is Cahokia, as imagined by Herb Rowe. You can see, right, the earthen mounds. Now these low depression areas, which are shown here as being filled with water, are called barrows. And the barrow simply means that this is the soil that was taken to build the mounds. So when you're in the woods and you see what you think might be a mound complex, that's one of the things to look for, is the presence of barrows. And please shout out if I move away from the mic too much. This is Great Serpent Mound. When we think of mound cultures, we tend to think of the Mississippian cultures, and we think of Great Serpent Mound and some of the other iconic mounds that were built by the Hopewell. By the way, 1,000 years before Cahokia and the height of the Mississippian cultures is the time that the Hopewell, and before the Hopewell, who built these amazing structures that were geometric, etc. 1,000 years before that, Boy, it's hard to run two things at the same time. So 1,000 years before that, in the land where Harvey comes from, was Poverty Point. So Poverty Point, as you see, mound construction beginning 3,800 years ago, 1800 BC, and it was constructed over a very, very long period of time. And before that, there was an area called Watson Brake, which was believed for many, many years to have been a satellite community of Poverty Point, which, if you read the previous slide, there were at least 100 associated habitation sites, towns, villages, et cetera, associated with it. So it was assumed that Watson Brake was one of them. It was privately owned, so it was a long time before it was allowed for archaeologists to do core sampling, et cetera, and discovered that it was actually 2,000 years older than Poverty Point. So our own cradle of civilization is Louisiana. Because if you go back before Watson Brake, this just in the American Journal of Science, June 1st, 2022, the LSU, that's Louisiana State, campus mounds with construction beginning at about 11,000 BP, meaning before present, are the oldest known extant man-made structures in the Americas. So that's mound building. This guy, Cyrus, did a map, which unfortunately I ordered the copyright, but it didn't get here before the presentation, so that's a little bit fuzzy. That's the free version. Every red dot is a mound site that was acknowledged in 1894, and even before that. Whoops, got ahead of myself. So if you look way up here in New England, you look up into Canada, you look all the way up into here, you'll see red dots. And yet, they were never fully acknowledged, appreciated, and respected. And instead, this is what we did. We used them to lay down the roadbeds, to fill in the harbors, etc. Those are mounds from the state of Massachusetts, eastern Massachusetts. So, these are mounds that have been, these are all in the Midwest. They've all been identified, they've all been protected, and these are exactly like the mounds that I see right down the road from my house. That's maybe a half a mile from my house. And that tall mound is heavily treed, so I grabbed it in the snow. This is the whole site. Over here, that's the mound in the woods right there. There's another, what they call loaf-shaped mound, so it's like that, right behind it, and another one right here. And if you look here, these are the barrows. Here's another picture to show you clearly the barrow. It's often wet, vernal. Okay, now we're going to get into LiDAR. Now I heard about LiDAR back probably, I heard about the state LiDAR in the mid-teens of, all right, now we're really ahead of it. There we go. So this is a LiDAR image of a known entity here, this mound complex in Ohio. And this is actually a screenshot from my computer looking at the publicly available LiDAR. They did a superb job, I think. In very old school, that was, I can't read the date, but I think it's 1846 is the year that they made that map. And again, this is using 21st century LiDAR. So I'd heard about it. I didn't know how to access it. Around 2016, I happened to meet a land surveyor who gave me the key phrases that I needed to get in, but you needed high-speed internet, so I had the little sticky notes all down the side of my computer of the hours of the libraries and within 15 miles of my house, and I'd drive there, use the LiDAR at the library take a screenshot, email it to myself, go home, and then study it on my own computer. It was laborious. So now, if I can make this advance, there we go. So one of the first really magnificent mounds that I found on my own once I had high-speed internet at my house is this. This is actually in a state forest. And if you look here, you'll see the head of a serpent, and the serpent snakes up like this. Can you all see that? And then it has this fascinating structure, which, take a note of that, and that if you drew a line right through it, you would come to a partially destroyed circular mound here. These are all mounds. And then up here, this, if you're into Mayan iconography, looks a heck of a lot like zero or a clamshell, which fascinated me. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it's a fascinating mound structure. And then it has this and this. There's mounds here, here, here. And this is a river that runs north-south. Now that seems to be a pretty common thing for anybody that wants to go on and do what I'm doing. Look for a north-south river, and you may very well find something running up alongside of it. So I went here. Unfortunately, this is an old trail, which was a road once upon a time that's been discontinued. This is now a state forest. That does not mean it's protected. They built a fire road from the highway straight up through what was probably a twin serpent. And I will show you a view looking across from here to here to show what's left of that really appears to be serpentine. So I'm going to focus first here and show you what it looks like. Here's a close-up. Whoops, pressed the wrong button. Here's the serpent's head. Here's the serpent coming up. Here's that other structure going down, and here's the edge. This is a stream, and this is all wetlands all around it. So it's built up out of the wetlands. I have climbed up onto the serpent spine. So I'm standing on the serpent spine, and you can see the serpent going off into the woods. Can everybody see that? Now I'm standing on the serpent. I'm on the serpent, and then this is the road that's been cut through. Now look at this beautiful, perfect serpentine. So when the road cut through and destroyed the twin serpent or whatever it was, you can see that serpents not only undulate this way, but very much like the lithic versions, they also go this way. Now I'm going to walk up, and I'm going to start here, and I'm going to walk along this, and I'm going to walk out onto this. This here is flat as flat as flat. And then right here is a boulder that is a row of boulders going out. And here we go. There we go. So this is me on top of that edge that runs along the clamshell. This is the flat. It is absolutely flat. Back up on the edge of it here, near the very top edge. What I wanted you to see is that from here you had this incredible view of the skyline. And I would like to go back again and see if this line at all mimics this line, because it is not even. Now here's that boulder that's on the edge, and as soon as I saw the sun, I thought about the date, and it was within 1 degree of the cross quarter. And I had noticed an alignment along the serpent to the cross quarter. So I then ran as quickly as I could back down the spine of the serpent to get back. This is the wetlands. around the edge of the serpent's head. This is the very edge of the serpent's nose, the wetlands, and it was just stunning. The picture does not do it justice. It was spectacular. So I climbed back up on top of the serpent's head, and I just want to show you, this is the wetlands that I just took a picture of. I go to the top of the serpent's head, and then I'm going to move back to this position, because this is a knoll, as this is. And that is the cross-quarter alignment. Come on now. There we go. I'm on top of the serpent's head. Unfortunately, I shot that with an SLR that didn't like shooting in that low light. This is the knoll on the serpent's neck, looking at the cross-quarter sunset, February. Okay, so now I go down off the serpent's head to stand here, so you can see this little dip. That's where the sun set. It's just gone below the horizon, but you can see the line from there to where I had just been standing. Okay, now here's another one. I have not investigated this one. The entire mound complex has been destroyed except for the last piece, which is this barely serpent, and there's that same little shape pointing to a very small mound. I see this lithically represented, where serpents will have a piece of quartz ahead of it, and sometimes also right behind it. Okay, this is a spectacular mound complex on the state line, on one of the state lines in New England. Here's the river. In this case, rather than being built up, this one appears to have been cut away and smoothed over to be created. And it's really spectacular. It has these features that are clearly manipulated with intention, and as opposed to this surrounding landscape. So mounds will be distinct from the landscape around them. I thought this was safe. I knew this place since 2019. I never worried about it because this is a public trail that is part of an interstate trail, and it actually comes up here, and I'm sorry, my voice is cracking because this is what it looks like on, can you see it? Can you see the outline? There's the big mound. Is that clear? Can you see it through the trees? This is what really stands out. Anyway, we'll move on. So Piper and I get here, and the first thing we see is that, sure enough, there are just incredible alignments of stones going around, and there's linear stones, and there's ceremonial stone groupings, etc. And then all of a sudden we said, uh-oh. And this is a trench that was built in one of the banks. They're all over the place. They came up there with heavy machinery to build these trenches to minimize erosion, to make erosion channels. And I don't know, but I think that dog looks really depressed. I was. The CSLs along the banks had all been smashed. But this is the view from what would be the main mound, the top mound, really commanding view. We saw a lot of spectacular stuff. I was looking to get to that little triangular mound because on the map, it's a direct alignment south to two 800-foot peaks that are sometimes referred to as the cat's ears. And this is it. This is the front edge of it. And sure enough, there are stones left behind that would be the alignment. You look from here through these two. Yep, I left her behind, sorry. To here, those are the cat's ears right there, 1, 2. They're 800-foot twin peaks, and that would have been the view. That is 180 degrees south. So kind of depressed. We left, we watched the sunset, and got out of there. I did find another one. I have not visited this one yet. It's badly eroded because the river used to go here and now the river goes here. But you can see some of the telltale features of a built construction and over here as well. So we have not seen that one, but it gives me hope that the one that was damaged is not the only one. I wanted to point this out in the, this just came out, and hang on, I can't see without glasses, so. All right, so Kevin Mullaney's article about the Throgs Neck Bridge Crescent. Here's the image of the crescent, so I wanted to take a look at that. So here's my flyover. Okay, there we go, there's the flyover. There's the crescent right there. So let's look at it in LiDAR. Bink. Oh, here it is, the very end of it's been lost to this little road that you can see in the previous picture. Okay, so the question is, okay, so it's a crescent-shaped mound. You want to know, is there any precedence for such a thing in New England? So we're in New York. Let's see if they exist in New England. Well, they exist in Ohio because Squire and Davis made many, many images of crescent-shaped mounds in their maps. This is in the state of Massachusetts. These are still intact. If you were to come here, you would find that this is now a great big golf course. But you can see remnants of what may, if you only saw this, you would question, were these modern made or were they co-opted and turned into traps and pits? But because there are remnants left behind, the chance is highly probable that this was all a site, because there are sites all around it as well, very, very well preserved. This one, unfortunately, a golf course, but on this side, if you see this, you've got the main road, you've got water, you've got a housing area, and then you have this dirt track. So I focused in on that. Unfortunately, the LiDAR in this region is not good, so it's very pixelated, but this area is all wooded. Here's the dirt track, that's the dirt track, and here are the intact mounds. Just south of there is a great shot because this is a much larger U shape with an entrance. Actually, this would be the entrance and this presumably the exit. But I wanted to show you this because here's the stitch mark between an old LiDAR scan and the newer one. Eventually, I hope that both sides will be done, but for now, if you live in this part of Massachusetts, you get that, and if you live in this part of Massachusetts, you get that, and that literally is the line on the same site. Okay, Norman Muller. Here's one of the sites that he wrote up. And these are the measurements that were taken at the top. And this is the view from the top. You can see the incredibly flat top and these steep sides. That is a human construction. And it is not in the history books of the town of Great Barrington, and it has been researched historically. There's no writing of it ever having been constructed in historic times. I have to catch up with myself here. All right, now we're going to move on to a different type of mound. This is a step mound or a terraced mound. And unfortunately, I'm sure everybody can clearly see these step terraces. That's my nephew and his significant person. We went up here not to see the steps, but to watch the solstice sunrise. And it wasn't until the sun rose across these mounds, which had previously been noted by me as mounds. So we went up there together, and as soon as the sun rose, it illuminated the steps, which I had never seen before. Unfortunately, the LiDAR in this area is very poor, so they don't show up. So I'm going to bring you to a different site. These show up. You see the terracing. It's incredible terracing. This is in the middle of the downtown of a well-populated town. There is no mention of them. The Historical Commission is not aware of them. At least not the person I spoke to. I should think that if they knew they were there, they would have told me so. Here's the river. Here's the main road. This is the railroad tracks. This was a farm. It's been since subdivided. And unfortunately, these mounds right here, or these terraces, are gone. There's now a multi-level house planted there. These were mostly destroyed by logging. These are difficult to see on the land, but these are very well visible still. So here's us. These are the ones that have been damaged by logging. So it's only by having Piper stand there that I could see it. But these are much more visible. That's my husband, Mark. He was very patient with me that day. So you can see they come, they drop, they're absolutely flat, they drop, it's flat, drop. It's hard to see in pictures without somebody helping out. So the CSLs, lithic landscapes, they are present, but they appear to have been largely removed. They tend to be where there are trees that have not been cut in a long time. And, oh, I meant to tell you something. Jeez, can we skip back to the city image with the steps? There, okay. Look right up here. Do you see this gorge? Well, right above the gorge, so it would be up here, is a lake. And this gorge appears to have been formed either naturally or enhanced from the lake to here. And then there's evidence of channels. So it is theoretically possible that this was a channel built or enhanced to channel water to irrigate these steps, these terraces. There's another one coming from the same lake that comes down to this side, which certainly could have been used as irrigation to irrigate this side, which would have ultimately gone down into the river. Okay, we're gonna go back. Okay, this is that gully. So where I'm standing would be towards the lake. That way is going down. There are big stones that have slid down because this is now a public walkway. And at the top, above all that, near that trench, are shrines, a bunch of shrines. And if I could zoom in on this one, it says something like the old temple or something like that. Something about a temple is written right here on this one, and you can see the pillars. And that one right there is this one here. And it gets weirder. First of all, closer to the trench are these stones. And I noticed that this stone is actually perched on smaller stones. Here you can see. And this is a plant that is associated with ceremonial sites. And there are others. There's another shrine in the same area. There's a bunch of shrines. I took some of the more interesting ones, and I chose to show you this one because contrast it with this, which is a few hundred feet away. All right, if you follow that river that I showed you before, about 40 miles down the same river, and then up a tributary, you'll come to another one. This one is really spectacular. Again, I have not seen this one yet, but once again, there's a great big house planted right on top of it. But these appear to be intact terraces, and I have since found a third one, so it is not unique. It was a type. Here's another type. This is an enclosure mound. It runs over a great distance, and I spent an entire day up on this end, where it is a phenomenal, one of the most intense areas of stonework I've ever seen. And I'll show you some pictures. And then the second day I spent studying this one. So here we go. This is a close-up of the second one. Again, you can see the barrow. All these are barrows. And then the mounds. Is that beautiful? I'm in love with this one. I thank the last NERA conference for teaching me how to use Avenza, because this is way out there, and I would not have found my way there and back to my car if it wasn't for Avenza, so thank you. And off we went. So on the upper end, stones, lithic patterns in lines and angles and semicircles and circles, and the use of quartz was spectacular. This one here, there's a notch. If you look through the notch, you go right through this hole and you go right out to a point on the horizon. And this is in the center of a CSL, and when the sun hits it, it illuminates. Can you see that pinkish color? That's the sun reflecting through the inside of this and illuminating it pink. It's like somebody turned on one of those Himalayan salt light, it was incredible. Quartz everywhere, just massive fields of quartz placed in alignments. I did not uncover anything, but I was still wowed by what stuck up. The other thing is there were triangular stones everywhere. Again, I happened to be there within a degree or two of the equinox, and so here is a whole array going off in like the compass. And there's your west right there. There's that plant again. Do y'all see that? You see the carved eye and the circular. It was worth putting in the presentation. That's all on one side. And then as I was leaving, this is after sunset, so the lighting quality is poor, but here is this enormous shape of a seat. And again, here's your horizon view. Now this is day 2. Now we're up on that enclosure mound. It's huge. It is absolutely huge. Y'all see Piper up there? It's a huge mound. She's 20 pounds, so she's my scale. I don't have to lug a backpack of stuff. So you saw in the LiDAR image that some of them are very circular and in rows. So I am standing on one, looking across at another. Now I'm going to climb down and shoot back up. Here's one. Here's the other. And I'm standing at an angle, so you're only seeing a little part of this one. Across the top of one, to give you an idea of the shape, the rounded top. And then we say goodbye to this site. And on to, we're traveling all over the place. I hope you're engaged. Again, here's a north-south river, and here is this incredible mound complex that just runs all along the side of it. These are enclosure mounds. I'll give you an idea. This one right here, if you go, it's almost like a face, neck, body, and this little bell upside down, well, not upside down, but like a bell-shaped hat with a mound in the center. I'm going to show you a close-up of it. But that's about 1,500 feet. That's more like, that's 2,000 feet. If you don't have that, that's about 1,500. So if you add that, it's about 2,000 feet from end to end. It's 500 feet across here. They're huge, and they run all the way up along this river. The upper ones are destroyed, and the lower ones are destroyed. But this is semi-protected land. Here's a close-up of right here. That's the road that bisects. So here's a close-up of two of them. And I'm going to show you what this looks like right here on the cut. See? So here's the cut through. And I find it fascinating that there is this line right here. Whether that's the original land line or I don't know. Again, that one is this, and this one is that. Across the top, this is their height. Stone alignments going across. CSLs. That one's really sweet. I'm just going to breeze through these. You can see what they are. This is inside one of the enclosures, looking back out. And these are some things that I'm on my way to go see. These are in two different places, but I like the similarities, which really, because I find multiple ones of similar type, it helps recognize it as a style or a culture or what have you. Here's another one that has me really jazzed up. I'm excited to see that one, particularly because there are so many beautiful pairs and lines go through it. So these are ones I have not seen. This one, believe it or not, is in the state of Massachusetts. Who would know? Look at this. All of this, it appears that there was one here that's been destroyed, and then little remnants here. So those are the next three on my docket. And with that, I close.
Questions for Sarah?
Yes.
Yes.
Where were most of those images taken in general?
In general,
In the Northeast and
every single one, with the exception of the Throgs Neck Bridge, were in New England. And I only used the Throgs Neck Bridge image because I wanted to show that they're not only in Ohio and New York, which New York has been recognized, but that they're also in Massachusetts. Everything you saw here today was within New York's, I mean not in New York's, within New England's boundaries, yes. Yeah.
I was looking at your slides of woods and the terrain as it is now.
Yes.
And I could picture myself just walking around my property in Boxborough,
Yes.
seeing things like that. Now, do you have any idea about a time period when this is?
I don't, but that's the reason that I started the presentation with the cultures who were still present at the time of colonization. And I go back 11,000 years before present as the mound building tradition ended in 1731 with the last battle after the Natchez revolt and the war between the French and surrounding tribes of the Natchez, and they were the last people in historic times to bring a new mound into construction.
Well, a lot of those hills and valleys, people today just say, well, they're little estimates,
Exactly.
or they're little tame
Yes.
terraces.
Yes.
So your concept and use of the LiDAR is really showing something else.
Exactly. So I'm hoping because the LiDAR is available to all of us, and I can show anybody that wants to learn how to access it, we can change that. Because there's no way, if you go back to that map of 1894, and the thousands of mounds that were known to exist in the late 1800s, it would seem implausible that the eastern seaboard would not have been part of that, because they have goods that were found that come from the eastern seaboard. There were trade routes and very, very active trade going on. In Cahokia, which was right across the river from present-day St. Louis, had a favorite drink that came from leaves from Florida, from a holly bush in Florida. So the trade network was massive. So how could the eastern seaboard have been not part of it?
Have you talked to a geologist to rule out any natural causes for some of those?
As mounds, I've talked to geologists about the stones, but I have primarily been talking to archaeologists and anthropologists in the Midwest, where they are more understood and studied, which is why I followed with that recent slide. That's a conversation from a few weeks ago. It's really hard to see, but I saw a hand right over here.
Comment, you pointed out the one form earlier in your talk that would be called the clamshell shape.
Yes,
It was also in another presentation earlier.
possibly.
That's a really important form in many esoteric traditions.
Uh-huh.
It's called a mandorla, or the Vesica Pisces. And often sacred images are shown surrounded by that form, especially sacred images.
Mm-hmm.
And it's formed geometrically by the overlap of two circles.
Okay.
So in some images, one circle is the sacred and the other is the earthly, and the
Sure.
place where they overlap is the sacred.
Sure. As in the sacred geometry where it's many, many overlapping circles, which I see in the stones, but I hadn't thought of that particular mound as being that, and I appreciate that perspective. And
Fred has a question.
yes.
It's an ideal thing to test with opticals, simulated luminescence, because they're at the top of the mound when it seemed light when it was deposited,
Mm-hmm.
versus you get the Earthen pit, which should give some idea of the geological situation.
Sure. I do know that they dated, when they dated the LSU mounds, there was core sampling done And I also heard from Norman Muller that a core sample had been taken from that pyramidal mound. At 8 feet, they found willow. Unfortunately, the person who was keeping those when they were deceased, the samples were not kept, so that's been lost without ever having been dated. So there's much work to be done, and I guess the purpose of me standing here today is to say that they are here, and they are worthy of our time and attention, and I hope that other people will jump in. And I would love to collaborate with people because I have a database of more mounds than I could visit in my lifetime.
Lady at the back there with the
Oh,
question.
yes.
Sorry, just very quick. You said you can instruct people, help people access the LiDAR data, which I've tried so many times on New Hampshire.
Yes.
And the data quality, I'm not sure about doing something. Is there a spot on your website or somewhere to give the step-by-step for that LiDAR that you're accessing, or is it just different quality in different places as you know?
There is different quality in different places. When they began doing it, it was, don't quote me, but it was around 2013-ish. And those early flyovers were not very high quality. The ones done in 2016 were far superior. And there are new ones being done. The one that's over Ohio that I showed you on the side-by-side maps of it was called Fort Hill. That is spectacular LiDAR. That's much better than anything I've seen in the Northeast. I don't know when it was done, but it all depends on when that area was mapped. And I'm only in kindergarten in that whole field, but I've learned a lot in the past few years, and I'm happy to share anything that I know.
Okay, there's two more. Let's hold it to these last two.
Yes.
Sir, over here.
You mentioned something, Sarah, you said 1731, the French document, the last mound builder or something?
Okay, the Natchez people who were, well, anyway, they were in the, not exactly the southwest, but out towards that way, near where the Caddo people still are. They were east of the Caddo. You have to look on a map. But anyway, it's Natchez, if I spelled that right. They were currently continuing their tradition into 1730. And in 1729, over trade relations and the French trying to position themselves, just like today, it was just like today. And they revolted against an oppressive trade agreement. And it ended up in a war that lasted about 2 years. And by 1731, they had been just devastated by this war. And that was the last. They had just built a mound. And it was the last known newly constructed mound of the tradition that goes back at least 11,000 years.
Okay, one last question.
I'd just like to know if the north-south flows are vital, or if they're all on the north flow.
They are not, and I showed you one that was along an east-west river. That was the one that got logged. The real, if you really want to find them, find the place where the north-south meets the east-west. That's where you're going to find them.
Thanks very much, Sarah.
Thank you.